If everybody can make it to their seats, we're going to get started. We want to let some of the folks that we know are probably still on their way make their way here, but we're going to go ahead and get started. We've got what I believe an amazing conversation tonight. We brought some amazing leaders to talk about educational policy and to speak directly about some of the things that we're seeing coming out of the White House right now. As I said before, these events are for you all, for stakeholders, parents, community leaders, and others who are making a pathway for a child on their K-12 journey. A little bit about Book. We've been around since 2016. And without going into a lot of information about us tonight, we are an organization that really works on one basic premise, and that's that a K-12 education at its highest level is deserved by every kid in America, particularly Black and brown kids. And the reason I focus on Black and brown kids, because for many of them and their parents, the only inheritance that they will receive will be a good education. And Book is formulated its entire journey in this space around helping African Americans understand everything that's on the menu for them. And we expect them to be unapologetic on how they get that education. Because for many of them, that will be the only thing that they will have to move their family forward. And so if you understand what these conversations are about, they're about making sure every opportunity that's available to get a kid educated is on the table and discussed and able to have debates about in order to make sure that we're moving our communities forward with that gift. And that is a quality, high-performing K-12 experience. So that is what Book is all about. We got a lot of things to talk about tonight, and we're going to bring up the panel to talk about it, but we're going to start with Tolton Pace. He is the newly appointed APS school leader, board member rather, and he has done some very interesting and amazing things before he joined the board, but we want him and wanted to give this opportunity to give this a little bit of oxygen, give him a platform to talk about the role he's in, and to talk about what he wants to do to make an impact for the kids that are served in the city of Atlanta. And so without further ado, I'm going to bring Tolton up and have him talk a little bit about his background and what he wants to do to help our kids in APS. Thank you.
Well, good evening. That was pretty good, David, but maybe, I don't know, about 75% of the room. Can we try one more time? Good evening. There we go. There we go. I'm highly interactive, so y'all excuse me if I do a little call and response this evening. Is that okay? Yeah, excellent, excellent. Well, it's an honor to be before you this evening. As David mentioned, my name is Tolton Pace, and I am the newly appointed representative on the Atlanta School Board for District 6. For those who may not be familiar with kind of what that district or that area of town covers, the easy way to think about it is to think about the Farrell High School cluster, so Southwest Atlanta, closer to Greenbrier, and the Southeast quadrant, Farrell on the southwest side and South Atlanta on the southeast side of the city. So those are the two primary clusters that I get the opportunity and the privilege to represent. For me, it's super special, super heartwarming. It's a full circle moment to give you a little context and a background of why that's the case, because I actually grew up in District 6. I grew up in the Farrell cluster, living off of Campbellton Road and Childress and Landrum and Mount Gilead. Like, that's what I know. Those are my formative years up through 7th grade. And then we hopped over to District 5 for a short time in the Mays cluster. But when I bought my first house it was in District 6 off of Campbellton Road. When I started working in ministry over 20 years ago, it was in District 6 on Campbellton Road at Greater New Light Baptist Church. So this is not new to me. This, as some would say, this is true to me and true to who I am. So really quickly, graduate of Douglas High School, APS through and through, started out in the West End part of Atlanta at Dean Rusk Elementary when it was still up and running. Went from there to southeast side of town to Crawford Long Middle School. Another reason why this is a full circle moment, part of that South Atlanta cluster. And then again, Douglas High School. For me, I had the opportunity to graduate at the top of the class of 96 as valedictorian. And the reason I share that with you is because my mom worked in APS as a school secretary in the 80s and 90s, making about $30,000 a year. The colleges that I wanted to go to cost about $30,000 a year. And so we had a plan. It was an individualized post-secondary plan that our family put together to say, look, your legal hustle is going to be getting every single A that you can possibly get so that colleges will write you checks to come to their school and not the other way around. And so for me, post-secondary readiness is high on the list for our students, whether that's college, whether that's a 2-year opportunity, vocational school, whether that's military, whether that's employment. This is a part of what I've done, and I've lived it personally, but I've also helped students to do this as well over the years throughout my career. And what has that looked like? Working in a number of nonprofits across the city of Atlanta, partnering with many of you that I see in the room today. That also looks like working in admissions at Emory University for a number of years, leading multicultural recruitment, and then being able to take that blueprint of what it takes to get into a highly selective school, bringing that back to APS, working at South Atlanta, another full circle moment, and saying, hey, students, here's what it takes to get to exactly where you want to go. Helping students acquire scholarships, ensuring they took SAT and PSAT, ensuring they went to summer institutes on their old program called Project Grad. All of these opportunities, again, helping them and their families lay the blueprint. For every first generation college or post-secondary student, there is a college or post-secondary first generation parent or guardian or family member. And so a lot of the work that I've done and want to continue to do is not only educating our students on what it takes to get and go beyond high school, but what does that look like for our families as well? And many of you in the room have already been committed to that work for a number of years. So thank you for your service in that space. Super appreciative of the partnership that we're able to do with you as well. So for me, that's a little bit about my background. I currently work for the Arthur Blank Foundation. That's my 9-to-5. I get to manage our West Side Giving portfolio. What does that look like? We focus on economic mobility for legacy residents in this community that we sit in, Vine City and English Avenue. Why is that important? Because we know as the city shifts and as the city changes, affordable housing is of the utmost importance, making sure folks can stay in place. And then workforce development and income enhancement, making sure folks have training, have great jobs, and have the income and the flexibility and the choice to choose to stay in their community and their neighborhoods. So I get the honor and privilege of leading that investment, leading that giving for the Arthur Blank Foundation to all of our favorite nonprofits on the West Side, West Side Future Fund, West Side Works, and a number of others who help build affordable homes and ensure our folks have jobs in both of those communities. So again, that's a quick snapshot of who I am. Why the school board? Again, this is something that I've wanted to do since I was a student down the street at Dean Rusk Elementary School. When I first met Dr. Alonzo Krim and understood and learned what a superintendent was, and I had a mom who worked in the district and an aunt who worked at Kennedy Middle School, now Hollis Innovation Academy, there was something bubbling at our family conversation tables. There was something bubbling in the halls over in the west side of town in the middle of Harris Homes Government Project Housing. That inspired me. That said, hey, I want to represent other students who come from backgrounds like myself to ensure that they have access, exposure, and opportunity to the best possibilities that their mind could possibly imagine. So that's where it started. It started at Dean Rusk. It started as an elementary school student, and it never went anywhere. From running for SGA at Douglas High School, from becoming the first Mr. Crawford Long at Long Middle School, this was always the motivation. And so I have been intentional about working in the nonprofit space, working in community, working in APS 3 different times in 3 different positions. So we're focusing on numeracy. So we're focusing on literacy. Those are of the utmost importance. Academics, access, post-secondary access, post-secondary readiness. We just talked about that a few minutes ago, but that is the focus, to ensure that every student has a plan, whatever that plan looks like for them, that is customized, that is individualized, and that it has some sense of direction to showing them and guiding them to where they want to go and where they want to be. So what's the A again? All right, somebody's paying attention. I love it. Academics and access. All right, let's move to the B. Y'all say this with me. Bridge building and barrier breaking. Bridge building and barrier breaking. What does that mean? What does that look like? Oftentimes in school board settings and school district settings, we are, as we should be, our primary focus is our students. Secondary focus, I would say, is our families, right? But something that often goes not talked about or missing is, where is the teacher and staff voice in the room? Oftentimes we sit at our central office and it acts as an ivory tower that some think they cannot access or think that their voice is unheard. And so, having been in the buildings of our schools all across the district, I want to ensure that that voice is also getting heard. So breaking the barriers to ensuring that our teachers feel like somebody's listening to them. Right? Building bridges to ensure that they have some means, whether it's a survey, whether it's a monthly forum, whether it's me showing up at a faculty meeting, whether it's just a casual chat and chew conversation, that there is some access to opportunity for their voice to be heard, and that makes its way into governance and policy. Bridge building, barrier breaking. All right, y'all say, oh, openness, openness, openness and transparency. I promise, I commit to always being open. I am an open book. Don't ever want to hold anything back from our constituents, from our advocates, from our stakeholders. Always want to ensure that we're being open, and that we also create the opportunity for those who we are serving to be open with us as well. We just wrapped up, well, we're in the third phase of our strategic planning process, where we engage community in a number of sessions in the community, in person at different schools throughout our district, but also virtually as well. And so really excited to be able to offer that opportunity, but there's more to come, to ensuring, again, that we're always open, always transparent, that folks can speak into us and we can share back with them as we make policy and as we govern. Last, but certainly not least, is the E, and somebody knows what it is. Close, we're getting there. Equity, there it is. Come on, Tangi, equity. Ensuring that equity is represented in all that we do, all that we do. I love the opportunity that I've had to work as an ESOL instructor in our district. My wife is a 21-year educator in APS as well, and she's worked in special education, now exceptional education, the entire time. Focusing on the groups that are sometimes neglected or sometimes don't get all the resources that they need, right? And it's not just those two groups. I just highlighted those for point of reference today, but there is more that we can do to ensure, whether it's course selection, whether it's after-school activities, whether it's athletics, whatever the resources and the things are for engagement for our students, we've got to ensure that it's equitably distributed across our district. So those are my things. That's my why. That's my how. That's why I'm here. And it's an honor and a privilege to serve APS, to serve the city of Atlanta. Thank you so much for your time.
You grab a seat. That was amazing. I think he's ready. I'm going to bring up Tonya Winters, who has been a partner with us. She is now the South Regional, Georgia Regional Director for National Parent Union. She is a friend. She's been with me in this work since 2016. She's traveled across the country with me, you know, talking about some of the things that we talk about here in other cities. And I can find no better partner for families and children in this city in the work that she does. So she is going to do a short kind of Q&A, let you guys ask questions up with Tolton. So without further ado, Tonya Winters.
Good evening and thank you.
Good evening.
I'm like, I thought Tolton warmed y'all up, but maybe not. All right, so two things about us as we age: you need glasses and dexterity of hand. I'm going to start off with family, We got to have a conversation. We are well past the time of having a conversation. So much is at hand here, and I'll start off by saying, from slavery to segregation to systemic underfunding, African Americans have fought for the right to learn, teach, and lead in education, as well as other minorities with us, despite generations of government policies designed to deny us access. And with that, I will ask you, and that's the audience really, because you said what your tenets were in this position. I'll say this, I got into this role in October, and then the dam broke, and I was like, why didn't I get this job last year, right? Because as the Georgia State Director of National Parents Union, it's an organization for parents, built by parents, for parents. In my role, I am now also a Georgia State lobbyist. Go figure, at the Capitol. You see a lot, right? And so us both being freshmen, so to speak, in this role at this particular time, what is I'll start with you and then we can ask questions. What is a call to action that you would issue parents of all Georgia students, not just APS at this time? What is a call to action? What can they do right now where they are, wherever they are?
Great question. So, certainly advocacy is one of the biggest things that our families can do. And for those families who may not be as familiar with what advocacy looks like, I think we have enough of us in the room to empower them to do that. And some of us have been doing that already. I can think about raising the expectations for 30 years now. That's exactly what you've been doing. So while you're helping the student and helping the child to get to where they want to go, where they'd like to go, you're also empowering parents to be able to speak and use their voice, whether that's serving on a GO team at the local level, helping to influence budget and policy decision makings at that local school level, showing up to school board meetings, signing up for public comment, letting their voice be heard and known, not just one time, but on a recurring basis, showing up at events like this with folks who are in the room that are actually making policy at the local and the state level as well, having those one-on-one conversations. Hey, let me bend your ear for a second. I heard you do X, Y, Z. So I think it's incumbent upon us with the wherewithal, the knowledge that we have to ensure that we're pouring into our families. And many of them, again, are well-equipped. They've been doing this for a while. But for those who may need an extra boost or extra lift or extra kind of know-how, how can we pool our resources together to empower them to do that? I've always said for a long time, for our neighborhoods that have been traditionally under-resourced in the past or that have been under-invested in, we oftentimes have pride in our zip code and our police zone, whether it's zone 3 or zone 4, whatever the thing is. How do we turn that pride in an area code or a zip code or a police zone and turn that into some advocacy and some activism? And I think it can be done. And there's some great groups in the room. Jason Allen, who's done this for years to teach and empower our parents how to advocate for the things that they want and the things that they need.
We have time, and because of the hour, we have a lot to get to. We have time for a question or two. If you do have a question, raise your hand or come up. I'll hand you the mic. And if you don't have a question, Tolton will be around for you to ask him questions afterwards. All right then. That was probably as quick and painless as it can get, Tolton. You'll take it, yeah, because you got some rough days ahead.
Absolutely.
Right. And so thank you, Tolton.
Thank you.
And we are going to jump next right into our panel discussion. Our panelists have made it here through traffic, through legislative sessions, and all types of things in their day. And so we are going to get right down to the business. And as I call them up, I will tell you a little bit about them, and then they can tell you the rest. And so first up, we have Mr. Bryce Berry, who is an educator and a freshman House representative for District 56, and is Georgia's youngest lawmaker. We were just laughing about this is both of our freshman year, and I'm old enough to be Bryce's mother. All right. And next, coming to the stage, we have the Honorable Alicia Thomas Searcy, former House Representative from Cobb County and the first African-American to do so, who is she is currently the president of the Southern Democrats for Education Reform now. What can I say? Educator, school leader, mother, wife, powerhouse. Thank you. Who said? Thank you, Ralph. Thank you so much for finishing my sentence. Next, I'd like to call up Senator Rashuan Kemp. Yes, my senator, who is a former educator, now works in Georgia Charters as a Georgia Charter School leader, and is the senator of the 38th district, championing a few bills at this moment, but we are focusing on his early literacy advocacy with SB 93. And as I understand it, SB 307 passed today.
It did.
HB 307. All right. We talk about that when we start talking to you. I get excited and confused. Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to call up a friend, a sister in the movement. When I first started with APS at the district level, I used to seek refuge in their office. Tangi Allen, co-founder of Raising Expectations, along with Maria Armstrong. And together they have been serving and fostering community impact on Atlanta's West Side for 30 years. My sister in the movement. Next, I'd like to call up Mr. Ron Mayo, who is the VP of Policy and Advocacy for the Georgia Charter Schools Association. And last but certainly not least, Mr. Jason Allen, my colleague, my brother in the movement. We've been doing this work now for about 15 years. Jason is a veteran educator, an author, and a national director of partnerships for National Parents Union. Mr. Jason Allen. And so the gloves are off this evening because we need to have real conversation. We are in a moment where education is being used as both a weapon and a warning. The Trump administration's plans to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education is not just about policy, it's about power. For Georgians, this touches everything at our fabric, our land, our housing, our transportation, libraries, and most critically, our children. And so today we're going to go deeper to unpack what's happening, what's at stake, and what we can do about it. Because we are not powerless, we will fight back, and we will give it everything that we have. First question for our youngest legislator. Based on some of the data that we have on our NPU website and across the nation, Georgia receives billions of dollars in funding from federal government. As both a teacher and legislator, how are you advocating for families concerned about the future of Georgia's children, and what steps are you taking to ensure Georgia has the financial resources to support public education amid efforts to eliminate the U.S. Department of Education?
Thank you. And first of all, thank you all for having me tonight. I'm very honored to be in the room amongst friends, amongst education policy champions. I really appreciate that. And the work that y'all do is more of the work that we do. So I really do appreciate that. But to that question, I've been very focused. Of course, as a teacher, I'm very passionate about education and legislator. And I have education bills, and a lot of my bills are for that very scenario. I have a bill that would enshrine into law 504 protections in the state of Georgia. Because again, the Department of Education goes, 504 IEPs goes with it. And so our students with disabilities are left out of that conversation as well. We don't think about those things. Every small thing that the Department of Education does for us will be gone, and we have to be prepared for that. So 504s, I talk about literacy and math remediation, because a lot of the money that our schools get, especially Title I schools get to go to remediation, will be gone when the Department of Education goes. So my bill, HB 517, creates a grant program for those schools in the bottom 5% to be able to afford things like math remediation services and intervention textbooks, literacy remediation textbooks. And the last thing we talk about is teacher retention and ensuring. I've signed into a bill that is a study committee on teacher retention and how we can make sure that we are keeping our teachers in the state of Georgia and not ensuring that they're still leaving. Right now, Georgia teachers leave after 5 years in the state of Georgia. And so we're trying to do everything we can to ensure that, whether it be teacher pay, whether it be reforming our schools policy-wise, what can we do to keep our teachers in the classroom? But everything that we're doing is about safeguarding and guarding ourselves, preparing ourselves for the inevitability or the chaos coming from Washington that we we don't know what's going to happen.
Thank you, Bryce. And just if any of you have this, I know if we had enough to pass around, they were out on the table. $457 million in annual funding for 230,000 students with disabilities, reflecting 13% of Georgia's student population is what's at stake. And if you have this, you can read more about it. If not, you can definitely find this information out on the National Parents Union website. We have it listed out for every state across the country. And so you can look and see how many millions, billions of dollars are at stake for this particular state to arm you when you are going to talk with your legislators, to know what you're, hit them with the facts so they understand that we mean business and that we are standing on business in this season. The second question is going to go to Senator Kemp. You've championed an early literacy bill. We'd like to know, woo, say that again, woo! Because I think Mr. Pace said that we are at an APS at an all-time high for graduating children from high school. And yet the NAEP report card came out and said 70% of the nation's children are not reading on grade level, right? And so you've championed an early literacy bill. We'd like to know what are the intended outcomes and how can we reframe early literacy as a liberation tool and not just a test score?
Yeah, thank y'all so much for having me. Before I answer that, I just want to put everyone on alert. I got my Obama suit on today, so I'm ready to fight. I got time today, right? I just got back from our Senate Education Committee, and they passed an anti-DEI bill out of the Senate Education Committee. So I want to make sure everyone is alert to that fact. Of course, we tried to fight it as much as we could, but ultimately they had the numbers, and so that is now going to go to the Senate floor. So I implore you to reach out to your state senators and let them know that they should be voting no on that bill. It did not make it on crossover day, and there was a reason why, because they know this is bad policy, and so they just took a bill that was going to give teachers an additional 2 days of sick leave and bastardized it and put this anti-DEI language on it. If schools promote any DEI programs, anti-racism, anything like that, they stand to lose funding. And so it's a horrible bill for public education. To literacy, my bill, Senate Bill 93, passed the Senate, and it's now eligible to be on the House floor. And this bill did a combination of things. And because of the legislative process, the bill that you spoke about earlier, House Bill 307, addresses some of that, and it's to ban 3Qing. 3Qing has been found to be an ineffective way to teach kids how to read. We were using this process of teaching kids to guess pretty much. So a teacher would say, hey, what is this word? Look at the picture. Try to figure it out by looking at other words in the sentence versus actually teaching them to decode. And that's what the science of reading is. It's pretty much going back to phonics, right? And so I have to commend APS because they saw an increase in student literacy as a result of the focus on science of reading. And so I just want to commend y'all for that. We have to make sure that we are focusing on this, because if we don't, we stand to just continue to graduate students that don't know how to read. They're not going to be successful in school. They're not going to be able to have these jobs that we have available for them. And so that's a critical piece. And my bill now also makes sure that we're not preparing teachers with a failed way to teach kids how to read. And so my bill requires the Professional Standards Commission to ensure that teacher prep programs are in alignment with the science of reading. And so very hopeful that that bill will make it across the finish line, because we know that literacy is the #1 priority right now. And the great thing is this is a bipartisan thing. This is one of the things that we can really focus on in a bipartisan way to try to make sure that we're having better outcomes in our state and making Georgia the #1 state for literacy. So that's the aim of my bill.
Thank you so much. And thank you for letting us know that. If anybody in here, and there is no shame, because some of us have not, we're a long way from, I'm just a bill and I'm sitting here. Listen, we have voted for folks and stood kind of sat back and, understood them to do their job, but we are way past that now. And so you can go to the Georgia State Assembly, you can Google it, and you can find your senators and your House representatives, and you can email them. You can email their aides if their information is not on there. And if you RSVP'd, we have your information collected. If not, we need to make sure we collect your information, and we can send you out all of the bills that you need to be alert about. What you can do, email, and pass it on like we pass on hot gossip. Just keep passing it on so everybody else knows. Here's the language. You can cut and paste it, send this to your representatives because it does work. I've seen it work in this legislative session. All right, enough about that. Ron Mayo. Let's start by saying something that a lot of people push back against, that most charter schools are free public schools. They are not private. They are also public schools. I know at the National Parents Union, we advocate for parents having high quality access to public schools. And David alluded to that. And that is by whatever means the parent has the option, not just the choice, but the options, and making sure that parents have options for their students, right? Because children are not cookie cutter. I have 3 sons that graduated from 3 different high schools. And I was privileged to be able to make that work because I had the knowledge. We didn't have money, but I had knowledge and access to data that let me say, hey, they learn differently, and let me get them in these schools that are going to be best suited for them. I am an only child. My mother thought I was crazy, and she's an educator. But that is where we are with today's children, right? They're not cookie cutter. So charter schools have historically operated with greater flexibility to meet the unique needs of their students, particularly those from underserved communities. Given the current political climate with growing pushback against DEI initiatives and looming threats to funding, for programs like IDEA and Title I, how do you see these developments impacting charter schools' ability to innovate and equitably continue to serve their student populations?
Thank you. Good evening. And I'll start by just pointing to the bill Senator Kemp just referred to. And it's important for us to understand that while there's so much attention placed on the federal government and the executive orders that seem to come out every other day that make statements and take positions related to education funding, the Department of Ed being shut down, et cetera, we still receive about 5 to 10% of our education funding from the federal government. However, it's important when you think about the bill that is now active in the General Assembly by way of some amendments and some last minute maneuvers, it's the state legislators who take the signal from Washington. So an executive order may not have much legal muscle. At times, there may be court cases, there will be lawsuits that challenge many of the executive decisions, executive orders. Ultimately, it's state lawmakers who can put into action ideas, concepts that reflect the will and the objectives of the administration. I would say—
If I can real quick, Ron.
Yes, sir, please.
You're absolutely right, because that is exactly what the author of the bill said today. This pretty much reflects exactly what the executive order came from the president said. So that's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to do everything they can to appease Donald Trump so they can run for a higher office here in the state. So that's exactly what's happening.
So for the 5 to 10% of funding we earn from Washington, DC, and the Department of Education, that money may be redirected. I think there's some talk about redirecting funding to different federal agencies to distribute funds that Congress appropriated. And the way I understand the federal government works is Congress appropriates. They determine how we're going to spend. And so long as Congress sees fit to fund Title I, to fund IDEA for our most vulnerable children, I believe the money will exist. Now, let's understand that the agency distributing that money may be different. the administrative oversight and process to allocate resources may look a little bit different, but understand it's Congress that appropriates. And as long as the law of the land holds, Congress will have its will met unless Congress decides to come back and codify the recommended cuts. And at the local and state level, where most education policy is crafted and implemented, most education spending is originated, we will have efforts to disrupt. We have seen the divisive concepts law in Georgia. We've seen a number of these bills and laws already enacted in states like Florida and other parts of the country where they've responded to this movement to attack DEI and many of the things that schools, charter schools among them, have embraced to provide culturally affirming curriculum and communities in the school building to support the social, emotional development of children from communities that may be underserved and may be disadvantaged in ways that the necessary measures they're using are things that we value. But I guess to answer your question about the creativity and the innovation, I don't think that will stop. There's a social pushback right now. I think a lot of the political resistance and pushback is coming through the social issues, and those are going to be a challenge. I think when we look at the portion of the education budget that focuses on the Civil Rights Division within the Department of Ed, if that now goes to the Department of Justice, the way civil rights laws are interpreted may be somewhat different. The agenda and the priorities of the Justice Department as it relates to civil rights in K through 12 education may be a little bit different and may cause some heartburn with schools that have books, curriculum, or cultural elements that are in conflict with anything DEI, anti-DEI. So the short answer is we ought to be sensitive about state legislators that have the same objectives as the administration through executive orders, while the executive orders may, in some instances, have lasting and meaningful impact. In other cases, they may just be a signal and a sign of what the agenda is going to be from Washington and what they would like to see states do in terms of policies to address some of those things that they want to eliminate.
Thank you. Alicia, with the continued attacks to eliminate the US DOE, what does that mean for reform work here in Georgia, specifically around student learning in the region and the rollout of this session's education-related bills?
Very loaded question. First of all, good evening, everybody. As one of the co-sponsors of this event, thank you all for being here, for your interest, for having this conversation. I hope that we'll have some good questions that come, and looking forward to hearing the superintendent. So I work for a national organization called Education Reform Now, and our sister organization, Democrats for Education Reform. And so on the DFER side, I help very talented people like the one sitting to my left get elected and do really good policy, like make sure we have early literacy policy in place. And so it's very important for us, and I work in the southern region, it's very important for us to make sure we're electing those people, but also helping them from a policy standpoint, and that's what we do on the earn side. And a 30-second point of personal privilege. I'm a former representative, so it's, it's always in me. But I wanted also to acknowledge that Ron and I served together. Ralph Long is here too, but we served together and we're in the foxhole working on a number of ed reform policies. And I'm grateful to be able to do this work with EARN because I get to do things for these folks that weren't done for us when we were serving, politically and in terms of policy. And so when we talk about what's happening at the federal level, I want to mention just a couple of things, and I know we don't have a whole lot of time, but it's really important for us and for me to help people understand what's actually happening. Because we've heard these threats for several months. We all know what's in Project 2025. If you haven't read the entire thing, you at least know some of the pieces in it. And so even though Donald Trump cannot actually eliminate the entire Department of Education because it is codified in federal law, he is doing everything he can to undermine its purpose and its effectiveness. And so when you fire half of the staff, and by the way, the US Department of Education has one of the smallest staffs of all the federal departments in the US government, half of them are now gone. Most of those people worked in the Office of Civil Rights. And so you can look at who's getting fired, the departments that are being most impacted, and tell what the priorities are and are not. When you talk about DEI, and I like to say it out because we need to be clear on what we're talking about, diversity, equity, and inclusion, superintendents, presidents of colleges were all sent letters saying, you got to get rid of DEI and if diversity, equity, and inclusion. If you don't, you stand to lose federal funds. The problem is there was no real clear directive on what actually that meant, probably because they don't know what it means. But the problem is it's creating confusion for superintendents, for school board members who need to implement policies that they already have in place. And so when we talk about the Office of Civil Rights, we're talking about somewhere around 12,000, don't quote me on that number, but 12,000 complaints that were already filed that have all been paused since the start of this administration. So we're talking about claims for students who have disabilities. We're talking about sexual harassment. We're talking about racial discrimination claims from all across the country. All of these things have been paused. The final thing that I want to mention, and we've heard many times already, and I know others will talk about the impact of special education, students who have IEPs, individualized education plans for those that don't know, who have 504 plans. These are our most vulnerable kids who need the most help. What I want us to know is that most of these things are in federal law. And so as much as the president would love to dismantle that, he cannot, because that's in federal law and students are protected in that regard. What we need to be concerned about, though, to my state legislator friends on the stage, and it sounds like you're already working on this, what are the protections at the state level to make sure that we are complying? I've spent the last 3 days helping my husband basically fight with my bonus son's school because they are not properly, effectively implementing his IEP. And so if you don't have that federal protection in place, you got to rely on the state. I will be the first to tell you that our State Department of Education in its current form is not the most effective place. It is not the place where you can find the most compliance or people who really understand the law to implement it effectively. And so we've got to put safeguards in place, as you have mentioned, to ensure that those things are implemented. The final thing that I will say is I work across the southern region. There are a number of laws that states are trying to pass, whether it's here in Georgia where they've introduced some law that basically says, if there's no U.S. Department of Education, here's all of the things that we need to do. And so we need to pay attention to the language in there. There's a bill in Tennessee that's moving through the process that essentially says if you are undocumented, you have to pay tuition to go to public school. Yes, if you are undocumented, read the bill for yourself in Tennessee. But those are the kinds of things coming from the federal government where they're racing to be the most racist possible. And it's at the expense of children who need the most services. So the last thing that I will say is that I don't want us to feel powerless, because we have power through our elected officials, through our advocacy organizations, all of us who have put this together, many of you who are sitting in this room. A good example is even in our own state, our state school superintendent had the unmitigated gall to try to eliminate AP African American history. And that lasted for about 2 weeks. but it's because parents organized, they raised hell, and he reversed that decision. And so we have power and we have to use it. Even though we're in this moment, we've been here before and we've seen even worse than this. So we can get through that. We can absolutely get through this.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Jason Allen. With the ongoing policy threats and funding cuts that will significantly impact special education services and efforts to weaken the Department of Education, Georgia families need to understand right now what. I know the states are suing to eliminate 504s and special education funding cuts and cuts to OCR, as Ron and Alicia both alluded to. And so I think it's about 17 states that are now joining a lawsuit to fight back. What can Georgia families do now? Alicia just alluded to them going to her bonus son's school, because in real time, one of the tragedies of this is that people don't understand, it's getting garbled, the language. And so they are not understanding and they are acting on being misinformed to use their local power to enact things on our children that if you are not paying attention to, they will get away with. Jason?
All right. Good evening, everyone. This is a very powerful conversation that we've heard from some of our speakers. I know the next Allen is probably after me. Special education and related federal programs. I wrote down notes because there's a lot that's happening, and you know, the revolution will not be televised. So there are some things that if you need more information, join us at the National Parents Union, nationalparentsunion.org. So I wanted to say that because I may go into some of the strategies and tactics that I'm not supposed to. What Georgia needs to know specifically, a lot of times when we think about special education, unfortunately, we think about a disabled child that's in a wheelchair, and that's one aspect of special education, our most vulnerable children. But I also want to bring a couple of other things to your attention that are extremely important, one being homebound services. As a special education teacher, I have had a student in the pandemic who has passed away, who was on homebound education services. These federal impacts are going to impact programs that are federally funded. I know Atlanta Public Schools is here, and having worked in their federal grants and program department, homebound services fits under federal programs. So these are real questions that we have to ask ourselves. If 54% of our budget in Georgia is impacted, that is 54% of monies that goes to special education and federal programs that support children with physical disabilities, homebound services. If you know anything about the initials PT or OT, that's physical therapy, occupational therapy. A lot of our children need these services. We also forget those of us who are dual exceptional, and gifted education is a part of special education. And this is also, to Alicia's point earlier, advanced placement classes. We are in partnership with the College Board, and they are very fearful of not just states like Georgia, who unfortunately tried to remove African-American lit and history from its curriculum and the funding, but also other courses that they have that are for all children. We think about ESOL services. I'm just being honest, no tea, no shade to APS, but about 10 years ago, we had to advocate for the student handbook to be translated in Spanish for more of our students and our families. So if we had to advocate for that locally, just think about the state mandates and accountability. High dosage tutoring. I don't know if people remember learning loss. That was a huge thing that people were talking about. But there are dollars federally through special education that impact that. I want to end on two things that are most important in this conversation to me. One being the college access and recruitment. Georgia State is very close to us. They've just lost funding around the diversity program that is impacting the way teachers are trained around the science of reading. That's special education. Most of our teachers in Georgia are trained in the science of reading through special education. I also want to throw out a couple of more acronyms. We know IEPs. EIPs are early intervention plans. Tolton spoke to this earlier. We also have SSTs, 504s that Bryce mentioned, we also have BIPs, which are behavior intervention plans that are through special education that also help to circumvent the school to prison pipeline. And last but not least, Georgia is in the top 5 states that have a high number of students that have indivisible or invisible disabilities, which means that these are children that rely on us to have safe schools, but also to have staff that can support them and their parents. And so I wanted to just break that down in the couple of minutes that I have so that people will know that it's not just one child, but it's all children. And that is why every asset of this panel and everything that we're offering, we need you to go back and take this to someone else to make sure that they're in the know. Thank you, Tonya.
Thank you, Jason. And last but not least, last names for rhyming, or same last name. Tangi Allen, you've spent over 2 decades serving Atlanta's West Side youth through Raising Expectations. With the Trump administration proposing to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education, if the resources you rely on are cut or decentralized, what does that mean for the future of mentoring, tutoring, and academic enrichment, like Jason meant? And then I want you to speak to the emotional toll that this could potentially take on the families that you serve.
Yeah, so I think it's bigger than just the organization. It's really what's the impact on our children? Because we're in this space not because we have nothing else to do, right? It was a need, and the organization Raising Expectations is filling that need. So for us, we have had a personal hit to our organization. We were a part of a national allocation that we participated in as a part of a Digital Equity Act. Again, that was a bipartisan bill in Congress. But honestly, what we found out is the word equity was an issue. Didn't know that we had to take words out of a lexicon in order for you to be eligible. I thought it was about impact. I thought it was about you having a value-added application. But what we found is that there are words that really drive the allocation of funds. And really, at the end of the day, it has such a significant impact on our kids. For Raising Expectations as a nonprofit, that obviously we're not, driven by property taxes. We don't, sell goods or services. We're in the business of people. And so that's probably like one of the hardest pieces of the pie. And when you take away resources, not because of you didn't make the impact or you didn't submit a report or your submittal was late, but much rather because the act had a word in it, it literally takes the wind out of your lungs, right? And we haven't even talked about the work of working with children. And so for us, we see that that's going to be impactful. So we rely on our state legislative representatives to represent our voice. We rely on our senators on the federal level and our Congress people on the federal level to represent our voice, to the point that Maria, who's the other co-founder who's here with Raising Expectations, we actually went to DC to say, hey, we have a problem with this. If Atlanta is going to be competitive for the next generation, then we need to make certain that Atlantans are prepared to be a part of that competition. And so clearly having access, equitable, I hate that that's a bad word now, equitable access to the internet is really like a low-lying fruit. Like everyone should understand that. But apparently, things are just so polarized from a political perspective that we've lost sight of what's really in the forefront of everything. It should be in the crosshairs. I thought the question was, and how are the children? People have lost sight of that. They don't care. It's all of these other circumstantial things that have nothing to do with the price of tea in China. I learned that when I was in Albany. With anything. And I think that's the most frustrating thing as a nonprofit leader, that we are having to invest energy when we're already kind of strained to things that are non-essential data points. Just to appease the moment of someone and their newfound vernacular preferences. So that's a frustrating thing, and it has real life impacts on our kids. So when I think about the families that we have the honor of supporting, I think about the cross section of issues that are going to impact them. from this one set of issues, right? Whether it be from housing, whether it be from education, whether it be from, from even jobs. Because in order for you to get jobs, you have to have an education. And if you're now creating a hurdle to preclude me from getting said education, then how am I going to be competitive in the occupation to preclude me from being in need of your supportive federal services? So all of it's like a rat race. And so honestly, as a nonprofit leader, we find ourselves really in the crosshairs of places where we don't know where to go. We're like frozen in place when really our job should be and continue to be about protecting the heart of this city that we love. And honestly, there's like so many things that are taking us away from what's most important. For us, it's children. For us, it's making sure that our kids graduate on time with post-secondary plans that can actualize, and 2 occupations that offer family-sustaining wages. But now I'm thinking about vernacular. So I have to share with you, Tonya, I know that probably was not the direct question you asked. I'm very upset about that. Very upset about that.
It's all encompassing. It doesn't have to be the direct question because we're speaking to what is happening nationally, how it affects us locally. And this is a wide range of the work right here on the stage. And so, no, there's no wrong answer to that because there have been tears, there's been frustration, there have been throwing things, there has been cussing, and almost fighting. So, and that's all just on me. No, seriously, this is, wow, yeah. I want to open it up now to anyone that has questions. And since I see Mr. Franklin had his hand up first, and youth is on your side, so sir, come get this mic. And I can say that because this young man has grown up in my home with my sons, and so he is also like a son, an educator and an actual grown-up.
Good evening. Thank you all. This is an amazing panel. Quick question, I think it's for Mr. Mayo. In regards to the debate over charter schools, how can we ensure the conversation remains focused on school choice in public schools and rather than it being dominated by the push for vouchers for private schools?
One way I think we can keep the focus on public school choice is to expand public school choice, to nurture relationships between charter schools and school districts. One of the challenges we have currently in Georgia is there are 21,000 kids on wait list to attend a charter school. And there's incredible demand, but when we look at the number of schools being authorized by local school districts, there's been 1 in the last 10 years. So I believe there's a reluctance on the part of local board members and superintendents to embrace the concept that so many parents have demonstrated their interest in expanding. But what I would say too is that if we can create these good options within the public school system, if we can improve the reputation of school districts in some areas where it may have fallen short in meeting parents' expectations, and welcome charters to the table to understand that there's schools that are going to be great partners to a school district. So one of the things we've run up against is the criticism that charter schools drain resources and they take students and funding away from the traditional neighborhood schools. And one of the benefits I've seen that charters have provided is being partners. So whether it's a school that provides some kind of services for neurodivergent students, maybe they've demonstrated an expertise in that area where the school district would benefit from and has in many cases benefited from leaning into that relationship and using the best practices that these incubators of innovation have identified and developed and created and now can be scaled and can meet the needs of the entire district and the entire community rather than being seen as other and those people and being isolated as something that's not part of the system. But I think as communities in and around Metro Atlanta and other areas that have been resistant to charter school policy recognize the need for more and see this as an opportunity to increase the attendance of students in public schools and improve the reputations of many of our school districts, I think we can have a better cohesive relationship, and then take some of the attention away from the other type of choice, which is private and less popular, and does in fact remove resources from the system.
Thank
Can
you.
I add to that real quick?
I wanted to see if you could also mention the amendment to the voucher bill.
Yes, yeah. So I wanted to touch on that to make sure that everyone knew it's not just Democrats that are opposed to vouchers. The House budget, the Republican-controlled House, stripped $100 million from the voucher program. The unfortunate thing is the Senate, where all the crazy stuff comes from, has just now added it back. And so I say that to say, if you have family members that are in Republican districts, let them know that. Tell them to reach out to their representatives and their senators to encourage them to keep up the fight. There's opportunity there for us to fight against this voucher bill. It's much harder in the Senate, much easier in the House, but that says a lot. The budget for the scholarship was 141 million. They cut 100 million of that. So there's opportunity there for us to fight. We'll see what happens with the Senate budget and once it gets back to the House, if they push back. But I think there's some opportunity there because this now has to go back to the House because the Senate's going to make some changes. And in addition to that, the House also created a grant, a $28 million grant, something that all of us up here have campaigned on to try to make Georgia not be one of the only 6 states that does not give an extra funding weight for educating students in poverty. I believe the Senate also stripped that out. But that just shows that there's some opportunity there. It's not just Democrats that are agreeing and fighting for some of these things. There are also Republicans. So I would encourage you to reach out. I can't say this enough, reaching out to your elected officials, how important this is, because we honestly don't hear from constituents enough. So it really does make a difference when we hear from you, especially if you come down to the Capitol. That's even more impactful. But, just wanted to share that there is some opportunity, I think, for us to fight against taking literally what does take money away from public schools is this private school voucher versus, the charter schools, which are part of the public education system.
And while the next person who has a question is coming up, I'm going to let Representative.
Yeah,
speak.
I'm going to just real quickly echo what Senator Kemp said, which is why he should join us in the House side, because we're much better and much more smarter than the Senate side. But in all seriousness, this is all part of the coordinated effort that they have. They're getting rid of the Federal Department of Education because they don't want any public good, period. They get rid of the Federal Department, they get rid of the Federal Department of Education. Now they're trying to get rid of the state public schools by diverting money from state public schools into private vouchers. This is all part of the coordinated effort where they're just trying to get rid of the public good, period. And which is just saying ditto to the point we have to stay in our elected officials' faces because there's a will to mitigate the harm that bill is going to cause, but we are not there. And so if you show up, we have 4 days after session, you should show up and demand that they put that money back into the poverty grant program, demand that let them know that we are watching them and that we're holding them accountable and that we're going to remember this in the ballot box next year.
We ride it down. So just send me afterwards. A lot of y'all work from home. You got time.
Yes, hi, my name is Shara Kennedy. I go by Kennedy. I'm a global clinical researcher. My company is Just Schooling. We focus on stress reduction. And currently right now, we have a proposal from APS in the city of Atlanta to develop or buy the lot by Willie Watkins Funeral Home. And I would like for us to be in correspondence to turn that place into a parenting outreach center. And I've have some proposals for that. So I would look forward to working with the teams or whoever's involved with that. As a parent who has had tumultuous experiences with my other partner for my child, I'm sure other people experience this as well. We know the impacts of trauma on children and how that impacts the adult lifespan. And so I would like to see some more programs that are geared towards parenting outreach, such as this. And so currently right now, we are looking forward to working with your team to help create some hub spaces where we could create with working with public health. I'm a previously an officer in the military with the public health as well. And I would like to coordinate these things. We work with Emory Morehouse School of Medicine, and we would like to utilize their public health students to be able to come out, mental health, to be able to work in these spaces with parents, okay? So I wanted to speak to that and what are some initiatives or programs that we have that are targeting these issues. Thank you.
Did anybody want to speak to that? Because I know that the parent is the first teacher, and we know that it is very important for parents to have support as well. And one of the main things that's been happening in Title I, I spent 20 years in education and 18 of those in family engagement. And one of the things that happens with the 1% is that it used to be mandatory, but in recent years, schools have been allowed to say, we don't need a parent liaison with our 1%. We don't need anybody doing the work of family engagement. And that has proved to really hurt many of our public schools. But Mr. Allen, you wanted to speak to that?
I just wanted to briefly say that Title I Part A is what houses parental involvement, which really should be family engagement. APS at one point in time, I think it's changed now, had the only district-wide family center, which has been replicated in 6 other states that still have their grant. I'm not sure where the young lady maneuvered to in the room, but I would love to be able to connect you with those grantees and how they're replicating that work in different states and reaching out to other areas in their state to build family and community engagement.
Just to speak to the mental health question, part of your question, one of the things that's still moving through the process, and y'all can tell us the latest, because in session, it's minute by minute. So yesterday it was one bill and today it's something completely different. And thank God I'm not down there, so I don't know the minute to minute. But in the school safety bill, there's a requirement for mental health coordinators at each school. And of course, districts are concerned because it's unfunded. But there are dollars at some point, there were dollars in the budget. It's going through the process now, so we don't know if it's still there, where each district and school will have funds that should be allocated towards mental health. I think in terms of opportunity, to your point, and to anyone who cares about mental health, this is probably the best time to have conversations because they've linked mental health to school safety. Now, should we also be talking about keeping guns out of the wrong hands? Absolutely. But we're not there yet. But I think this is the time for those who are service providers to start talking to districts about using those dollars that will be allocated in the state budget towards mental health resources.
And I will also submit that this is probably a great opportunity to partner with other nonprofit organizations that are working with said parents. Here's what I will share with you. Most of our parents do not understand what is happening. Our parents are fight or flight. Things happen, I move my family, we move to the nearest, closest place that will give me remedy to my problems in that moment. So I think that it's incumbent upon us to be able to connect with one another, to understand that they do not understand what's going on right now, and how do we reposition the vernacular such as it is very much in layman's terms. So they understand and they can create a plan to get ahead of it. I know that's one of the things that we've been conversing about very heavily with raising expectations. We know there's going to be impact for our families, particularly our families that are on Section 8 vouchers or receiving any kind of federal assistance. But what we know is our parents, they hear about it, but they don't understand how quickly and to what impact it's going to impact them and the kids, their children, and the children we have the honor of supporting. So perhaps that could be an opportunity if you pursue the notion of partnering with other nonprofit organizations as well.
Can I say one thing? Tangi said something important, repositioning the vernacular. Earlier, you talked about the kind of the trivial nature of having one word derail your grant. And I think it's important for us to recognize, and that's when I said sensitive, be sensitive to some of these policies and rules and recommendations you hear. It's that is what I'm talking about. We will have to reposition the vernacular. One thing I would say, and it speaks to repositioning the vernacular, to the young lady who asked about the parenting resources. The administration, the same administration we've talked about in Washington, is focused on fatherhood initiatives. So while that may be non-traditional, it could be beneficial to someone who's thinking about parenting, thinking about how to apply and access resources. If their motivation is fatherhood, then the position may need to be fatherhood as how you lead your request and your application to pursue that funding. Last thing I'm going to say is, and Senator Kemp talked about this, but we're how many miles from the state capitol? About 1 mile, and everyone in here, I would imagine, lives within 30 miles of the state capitol. We ought to get to know that place, because as these inevitable federal cuts happen, that's going to be more responsibility, as Alicia mentioned, and why it's important to be plugged into local school board and superintendents to understand how to access the Title 1A program through APS maybe now, because if a block grant comes down through HHS rather than the Department of Ed, now maybe APS is managing Title I, or maybe the state of Georgia, where we need to have a presence in Liberty Plaza and elsewhere to engage with our legislators more often and more vigorously. We need to be aware how to access and where the money is going to be and how to position the vernacular to compete and participate.
Good evening.
Yeah, Representative.
Not clapping for me, I'm sure, but good evening. I am Jennifer Saunders. I'm a 26-year educator, and I'm also a member president of the Georgia Federation of Public Service Employees here in Georgia. And I want to acknowledge one of our members, Mr. Bryce Berry, Representative Bryce Berry. So I've got a question specifically about charter schools in the state of Georgia. So Mr. Mayo, this may be directed to you. So with so many charter schools not doing well, they're failing, especially in APS from what I've noticed, they're consistently underperforming. How do we justify business as usual and even advocating for more charter schools when the ones that we have are not doing so well?
Thank you for that question. I'm glad you mentioned the quality piece, and we should expect high quality. And I had a conversation with Dr. Johnson this evening about high quality charters, and us we as charter school advocates, and I can point to my friend and colleague to the right, have to be willing to recognize that not all charter schools meet the needs of our kids. And there are low performing charter schools. The one difference I would say is there is accountability. There's accountability because a charter school is given a contract. The charter is the contract that says you have to outperform your peer district school, or you have to achieve a certain level for literacy, or you have to improve math scores by X%. So they have a contract with the school district or the state, and if they don't meet those benchmarks set forth in their charter, then the state and or the school district has the power, the authority, and the right to close that charter school, to shut it down so that they no longer perform poorly for our children. So I would say that number one is the accountability that does exist by definition, just structural accountability in charter schools. But absolutely, we should hold charters to a high standard because they're using public money. And if they're not delivering at a high level, if they're not meeting the requirements set forth in their charter, then the district, the state should use the tools in place to hold them accountable and to close them. And because what it does is it opens the door for a good school to come along, and it doesn't leave a sour taste in a district leader's mouth because they had a low performing school that they felt was misappropriating funds or making bad decisions for those students. And if we can improve that relationship and build confidence, I think we can have a much more trusting relationship between school districts and charters. And if we can deliver at a high level and hold those low performing schools accountable by closing them, then it'll be a clearinghouse, clearing situation where we can raise the bar.
Thank you.
Can I real quick, and somebody I'm
quickly,
sure is going to
Senator
attack
Kemp.
me for saying this, but I just want to be real. my organization, my day job, supports single-site charter schools founded by leaders of color. One, we need to see more schools founded by people that look like us serving our students, right? And one thing that makes me really upset to hear, I've heard this before, oh, it's too big for us to let it fail. The whole point of the charter school law is if a school is not successful, shut it down. Do not renew the contract. So there has to be some accountability at the board level to say, you keep renewing these contracts and they're not performing, why are you doing that? And my argument is, let's close those and allow for schools that are going to serve our children properly to be opened. So there is an accountability piece, and let's call a thing. There are schools that have been serving our communities for years that have not been successful, and they can't be closed because they're district schools. So there's two sides of this coin, but I will say, as a charter school advocate, I am someone that will tell you if a school is not successful and they have been given the opportunity to remedy their issues, that charter should not be renewed. Fulton County non-renewed a school. They can do that. And we need to see more of that, honestly, and see more schools given the opportunity, as Senate Bill 82 is trying to achieve, to give the opportunity to these local teachers and educators to create schools that are going to be successful in educating our kids.
So I'm gonna jump in here.
Tonya, just right quick. I'm sorry, because
I want to talk too.
Really, since we're on school choice,
We gotta.
5
so
seconds.
Listen,
This
listen,
is
hold on,
really
wait,
important. 5
wait.
seconds.
Cause y'all gonna be mad at me this time. Usually I just let y'all fly. David, what are we looking like on time?
We probably can take maybe one more question and then we need to.
So rather than one more question, what I would ask the next question to wait until after the superintendent has come up. And I know you all want to talk, but we definitely are on a timer. And in what you're saying, I would love for you to give a call to action for what can be done, and then we can keep it moving. Jason?
Perfect. Call to action. This is a perfect opportunity, especially for Atlanta, to thrive in innovating education. You have experts on this panel who specialize in that. We have colleagues across this nation that have done innovation in amazing ways. Atlanta is not there yet. I think this is an opportunity again for us to look at the model that we have. We did not mention partner schools that are also a part of the conversation of school choice, but we have a huge opportunity to look at how we can impact public transportation, public housing, our workforce, and innovation here in this city with technology through innovation.
Thank you. Alicia, you wanted to say something?
Yes. I want to be thoughtful about what I say. It's interesting that a couple of the questions were about charter schools, which says to me that we need to have a real conversation, allow more time. And I respect certainly the superintendent's back there, and we want to get him up here. I want to say one quick thing to add to what was said. Accountability is absolutely important. So is supporting these schools, though. Right. Whether it's a charter school or a traditional public school, they're all public schools. They're all serving our kids. And as someone who led a network of schools that were in a lot of trouble when I inherited them, if it were not for the outside support that I had, meaning outside of the state, because I went through the Broad Superintendent's Academy and could call on sitting superintendents around the country to come and help me, I would not have been able to turn around those schools. And so I also believe that if you have schools, for example, in APS, and we've been hearing about it, where charters are not doing well, I would ask board members in the room, superintendent, in these existing charter schools, what's being done to help? Because they're dealing with the same issues that traditional publics are dealing with. Learning loss from COVID, teacher retention issues, funding, attendance, not getting enough support. If you're a state charter, you have no support at all. You don't even have a district. So I don't want us to have this, you're not doing well, let's close. We're talking about children and families who have chosen these schools for a reason. So what's the support that's in place to make sure that all public schools are successful? I am not suggesting that you get to just keep failing kids. I'm not saying that. But I am saying, let's ask ourselves, what have we done? What are we doing to support all of these leaders and schools and teachers and parents? So the call to action is, let's keep having these conversations. I think dialogue, whether it's about public charter schools, what we need to do to support teachers, all of these things are absolutely critical. And sometimes we think, well, we just do too much talking. No, we have to talk because these perspectives are really important. And so I want, we have all these organizations who are a part of this. If you're not involved in any of these, join these organizations, get involved. We've heard, last thing I'm gonna say, we've heard several times tonight, go to the Capitol, talk to your legislators. They've got 4 days left. I had 56,000 constituents when I was serving. If I got an email from 10 people during a session, that was a lot. And I was always in the community. And so your voice is powerful. Your one email, your one visit to the Capitol could help change a vote of a legislator, help change the direction of a bill. And so you're already doing enough because you're here tonight, but take the time to send an email, make a phone call, go to the Capitol.
Thank you. And I would say, as we get clapped for our panel, they
Tonya,
have
if I may,
been, we have got, I want to, no, seriously, I know we could talk all night and we need to do a part 2, but we have to bring up the superintendent. I want to be fair to bring him up. I know everybody wants to say something, but we can also continue to talk amongst ourselves or talk afterwards. What I do know about Dr. Bryan Johnson, he is a man of very few words. Now he's going to say what he has to say. He's going to open up for Q&A, and we're going to have time to talk some more. So I want to thank the panel.
He's a man of action. That's what
he is. A man of action, but he does not do a lot of talking, right? And so I know that, and I want to get him while he's hot. But I want to thank the panel. I know we have a lot to say, and as you all take your seats, I want to say, you said something. We haven't done enough just because we're here today, because if we had done enough, we wouldn't be talking about a lot of the stuff we're talking about. Let's call a spade, or let's call a thing. So there is more that we can do, because I would venture to say, I could bet, and I'm not a betting woman, on how many of us have actually emailed our state legislators this session, the last one and the one before that. And that's all I'm gonna say. You don't have to stand up like in church, but what I will say is that we have not done enough. We are not doing enough, and enough, and more than that is needed at this moment, right? Because what's at stake is our children. And I know that this is who we are all here championing for. And so as our panel takes their seat, we will thank them, but also talk about coffee houses, neighborhoods, parks, and wherever else we can meet, so that we can go to the Capitol in the next 4 days. I'll lead the charge. All right. Thank you all so much. All right. Don't leave, because we're going to still be talking. As Dr. Johnson comes up, I want to give a very brief history of the U.S. Department of Education. Right. It was created to protect students' civil rights in schools pertaining to race, gender, and disability, to provide federal funding and support for disadvantaged schools, especially through Title I, to gather and analyze national education data for accountability and progress tracking, to coordinate education policies across states while respecting local control. And many of the things that are housed inside of the U.S. Department of Education on the federal level for colleges is Pell Grants. I would not have made it to Clark Atlanta University, Clark College at the time, to be exact, without a Pell Grant. The young man that brought me the water, the very handsome young man in the back that I gave birth to, would not have made it through the 4 years in college without a Pell Grant. And so I think, again, when we start to think about it, we have to start putting bits and pieces of actually what is at stake. Yes, there's some things that the state can absorb locally, and there's some things that cannot be absorbed. And so I want to bring up Atlanta Superintendent, Dr. Bryan Johnson. You can definitely stay down there. I'll come on down there with you. It's hard to stand up here, and my feet hurt.
You know, I have to sneak my
You
little
better keep some
comment in.
friends. You better be a
I'm
friend.
gonna make it really quick, because Tonya has that little whip going on. And that was only to say, one thing I've learned in doing this work, like we shared before, raising expectations. This is our 29th year of service. Next school year will be our 30th year of service. And one thing I've learned is it's a squeaky wheel that gets the oil. The reasons why things happen to us is because we are not being very vigilant about standing in the way. That's the problem. Unfortunately, we have grown to be apathetic, and we feel as though people come to solving the problem for us. Guess what? No one's going to save us. The saving is here in this room, and we all need to be showing up, whether it be at the school board. And the thing I love about Dr. Johnson, he opens his door. He wants to hear from us. So if there are concerns, the only way we're going to get stronger is if people put their hands and their feet and their heart into this work to make the boat move forward. So I am getting off the microphone. Thank you very much.
No, listen. Now, Dr. Johnson made me look bad with my friend, but I want to thank you for that. And that is because it gets real. The more we stay in here, we start to kick our shoes off and get comfortable. But Dr. Johnson, we had a conversation in your boardroom a few months back about having community conversations, frank talks as family members. And I want to thank you for honoring the commitment that you did for us. Because you could be a lot of places tonight. And so we had our first conversation, we're having our second, and then we'll round it up with our third. But you've been in the trenches now, riding the ship, so to speak, making tough calls, navigating necessary but difficult budget cuts to stabilize the system. And that alone is a heavy inheritance. And now we're facing the looming fallout of a push to dismantle the U.S. Department of Education. As a district leader trying to protect both fiscal responsibility and educational equity, how are you preparing for what's ahead? And what do you need from your community right now as you just kind of bring us up to date on what is happening at this moment in APS? Dr. Johnson.
Thank you. So I appreciate the question, appreciate the organization putting together, appreciate you all coming out tonight. As you alluded to, we're knee deep in budget season. It's an interesting time for us in budget. I use interesting a lot. I probably have used interesting, I don't even want to count, about 100 times a day. And I might use it a few more times for my few minutes with you this evening. But it's all good. Like I really want to be clear. We walked into about $100 million budget deficit, but it's all good. It's all good. We've seen this work before. We'll do it, and are trying to do it as pragmatically and thoughtfully as we possibly can. With that being said, I'm hypersensitive to this reality that there are people whose lives are being changed as a byproduct of that. So we don't separate ourselves from that. We feel that, we understand that. But at the end of the day, my chief charge is children, and to make sure schools are getting what they need in order to succeed. And so, around the system, let me give some numbers. Okay, so I mentioned $100 million over budget. Last year, budget cycle, about $74 million of fund balance was used to balance the budget. And it's fine to go into your savings account for one-time things, right? Roofs, HVACs. When you go into your savings for recurring things, it's not good. And so look, you can. We've done big budgets before, so you can shell game it and say I went into the budget, to fund this, not this. But at the end of the day, it's all a part of the budget. And so, there were some good investments that were made, some right investments, like things like 11% pay increase for our teachers, which, is a tremendous thing. As a byproduct of 11% pay increase, what we saw is that the first year to APS teacher that had 3 years or more of experience increased by about 20%. And so you would expect, now here's the caveat. Just because you older and wiser and you making more money, you better be getting some outcomes. I'm unapologetic about it, right? We're unapologetic about this reality, right? And so we hope that investment, the thought would be that investment is going to prove really well. But that was an investment. We invested in literacy, which is the right investment. We're investing in literacy again. We'll continue to invest in literacy, but about $12 million investment there. ERP, enterprise resource, Oracle, significant investment there. And then the other thing, and I was on with principals right before I came here, was the school nutrition was brought in-house, which was a tremendous move, about a $16 million budgeted investment. Looks like it'll come in significantly under budget. More importantly, we get great feedback, like literally even today as I was talking to schools, please don't go back to the other way. But there is a lot of opportunity to lean up and to refine. And that's what we're doing right now, is trying to be as intentional as possible about what we do. I'm quasi-dangerous right now because I've been a K-12 educator most of my career, right? But, you know, I got to get seasoned, if you will, by going over to the private sector and working as a corporate executive. And I serviced the IT shop in a publicly traded company. And so I was sitting with the person leading IT today, and I was asking her, you know, why do we have a PMO, a project management organization with a couple of folks that do change management and are ProSci certified? Like, talk to me about why a K-12 school system has that. Why isn't the person implementing the thing the project manager? I'm a country boy, Nashville, Tennessee, so I'm used to, I ride a pickup truck. It's outside, it's nice, but I drive a pickup truck, you know what I'm saying? And so I'm used to the project manager being the person leading the project. We don't need a PMO. So these are hard conversations, but we're here for it. And we're here for it because only 36% of our students are proficient in literacy, right? I can't have a PMO running around. Anybody project manager in here? I value project management. Are you agile or waterfall? What do you do, right? So I value project management, but the truth is, right, we've got to manage the project of improving student achievement. That's our chief project that we have to lean into. Okay, so let me talk about some other things real quick. My friend right here, Valerie. How you doing, Valerie? Booker T. Washington, all day. We have 22,000 empty seats in Atlanta Public Schools. Okay, I'm gonna let that sit for a minute. Many of our school districts have less than 22,000 students in them, and we have 22,000 empty seats. When I think of our schools, I think of them as community assets. Taxpayer dollars pay for our schools. We need to be thinking about how we leverage those resources as community assets. That's going to be a tough conversation, but we're here for it, okay? In our district, we have, of our 72 schools, 43 of the 72 schools are 65% or less capacity. So we've got work to do. The challenge is, just like anywhere else, right? When the district was built, it was built for 100,000 kids, right? At one point, APS had 100,000 students in it. Now we have about 50,000. And so we've got to work through that. And we've got to make sure that we're thoughtful and we're intentional and that we're honoring all the past. We're not touching any high schools. We put that out there. Okay. I've told her before. No high schools. High school, you know. Like I've done this job. You don't do high school. Folks come out the woodwork on you if you start nothing. They hold meetings on you when you're doing it. I'm gonna need an escort. But it's all good. But we got to have these hard conversations. We got 22,000. We'll see. And what happens? I'm gonna get some more data because I don't want to hear this. We are about, for every one student, we have about 4.5 adults. About 4.5 for every 4.5 students, we have about one adult. Our adult to student ratio is about 1 to 4.5. Okay, we have about 2 times, a little over 2 times more adults than most metro school districts. DeKalb is the next closest district to us from the standpoint of school footprint and student ratio, not the number of students. They have about twice as many students as Atlanta Public Schools. If we based our school ratio on DeKalb's numbers, we'd have 16 less schools. So, like, these are challenging conversations. The facts are important. I spent yesterday at a barbershop with a group of students that are at Phoenix Academy, okay? And I love that hour and a half I got to spend with these young men that are all black males, all have had challenges, all different walks of life. Highlight of my day. And so, hearing what they need in order to be successful, hearing them kind of talk about where there's some opportunity for the district, it was a tremendous experience. So I do feel, but we got to make some decisions based on facts. If we don't, it's going to be tough. And so, look, that's the news. It's good news, though. I started off by saying everything is doable. Like, what I'm really excited about is that we have this opportunity, that Atlanta, and I said to somebody, like, there's three things you're going to hear us talk about more and more and more. When we talk about our students, we want our students to grow. And that has to deal with academic acceleration. If you watch the State of the District, I'm big on the basics and the fundamentals. You'll hear us talk a lot about the fundamentals of teaching and learning. Our former chief academic officer will talk about the fundamentals of teaching and learning, what good schooling looks like, what good leadership looks like, what you have to have in place, high quality instructional materials, strong systems of accountability, a very clear system of assessment that is standards aligned. That's another conversation that's coming. And really high quality strategies that teachers use. So you'll hear us talking about that. You'll hear us talking about our graduates, as former Pace mentioned, really thinking about not just the graduation rate, but what's up under that graduation rate from a preparedness standpoint. 2-year, 4-year, you hear us talk about 2-year, you hear us talk about 4-year, you hear us talking about a hireable, meaningful credential certification or the military. You hear us talking about those kind of 4 things. The other thing you'll hear us talking about, 3, I told you growth, I talked to you about graduate, and the other thing you're going to talk about is grit. Grit. And I know education, I'm a country boy, education talks about critical thinking and problem solving and all the things. I believe our students are well equipped, like they are much smarter than my son. Don't tell him I said this. He's much smarter than I was at his age, like from what he's been exposed to. The difference is grit. My opinion, it's my fault too. But we all have, and our students, like I can talk into Google and get what I want right now, right? And so we've got to develop gritty graduates that understand. Sticky is coming. It's coming. I like it personally as a dad. We want APS graduates to be gritty. We want them to achieve at high levels academically. You'll hear us talk a lot about it in our growth area. You'll hear us talk about academic press. You'll hear us talk about academic press. But then we also want to make sure as they graduate, they're ready. Then we're going to make sure we talk about grit a lot. We want people to be able to feel it and touch it and understand what we're talking about as we tell the story of APS. Last thing I'll say, I said this in the State of the District. We are the history of APS is significant. It's like for me, from an outsider coming in, it's super significant. It's what draws people. We are the public schools. We're Atlanta's public school system. And I told David this one day, but before I even got in Georgia, like the country needs this public school system to be successful. Seriously, there's a significance to Atlanta public schools being successful. I mean, really successful. The headline that was on the NAIP should be the norm. I was told to Bryan Johnson earlier, this should be the place that people come to when they want to find superintendents. This should be the place people come to when they want to find principals. And there's a gift and a curse of that. The gift of that is like it's the place people come to when they want to find this is super talented, right? That's also the curse. People, you have churn, but that also draws talent. We are an absolute talent. So all the pieces are here. It's Atlanta, right? And the public school system should be and will be, and does have a lot of elements of excellence that persist. You'll hear us talking about the arts quite a bit. We envision, like I know this has been talked about before, but we've got to execute on a state-of-the-art performing arts school. Like, I'm getting way ahead of myself, but we got to execute. I came from Chattanooga, Tennessee, an hour and a half up the road, and we had a state-of-the-art 750, 800 student performing arts school. And students got in based on performance, right? And whatever thing they did, right? So everything we do, we gotta want to do with excellence. So I'm gonna shut up. I want to take questions. I've talked much more. You got hands popping, just.
Here I come, because I want the people who were lined up before to get the first questions. Okay. Where is Ms. Bird?
Thank you. My name's Marilyn Kincaid. I'm with a nonprofit called Wellbeing Action for Youth. And I want to thank all the panelists tonight and Dr. Superintendent Bryan Johnson and everybody who made this event possible. There were a lot of topics covered tonight, a lot of challenges, including mental health, chronic absenteeism, teacher retention, trauma, children who've been traumatized. And one thing that I wanted to just let everybody know is that there is a solution out there. And thanks to the generous grant of the Arthur M. Family Blank Foundation, along with Greenlight Fund, Atlanta public schools have access to a platform called Inner Explorer. And it's a mindful awareness program where the students and the teachers do together daily. It's like a Calm app, if you're familiar with Calm or Headspace. And when done, up to 10 minutes daily, the academic performance that has been proven from this is an increase of 15% increase in GPA, up to 22% increase in math and science standardized test scores, 43% decrease in teacher stress and anxiety, as well as improved mental health and well-being for students. And there's been a 60% decrease in behavior issues. One quick story is that how I came to learn about it is NPR featured Inner Explorer, and there was a Title I school in Tampa, Florida, and 80% of the students were homeless. So they were located across the street from an elementary student. The elementary school was across the street from a homeless shelter. Well, they had a grade F in math and a D in English language arts. They have been using Inner Explorer 5 days a week, and 5 years later, they have an A in both math and reading, and they have a near zero suspension rate. And so what's amazing is that the Greenlight Fund and the Arthur M. Blank Family Foundation has funding available. There are a handful of schools in the Atlanta public school system who are already using it, and Clayton County is using it, and there are a number of them. And so I just want to throw that out there that this is available and very accessible pricing wise, and it helps to address the mental health issues. I know somebody was asking about parents. There's a family tune-in option as well. And there are hundreds of stories where students are telling their parents, because dysregulated adults can't help children when they're dysregulated. So anyway, I know I've gone on a long time. So I wanted everybody to know that's available. Would love to reconnect afterwards. Thank you.
Yeah, and let me say this. I don't know if any of your other folks are, but if you have businesses or are involved in like things that you think are for the, reach out to us. Email us directly. You don't have to. I want people to use this time to ask me questions about the district, or what you see visionary, or feedback on what you think you can do. But please know, I'm here. We're here. There are 39,000 traditional students in this district and 11,000-ish that are in charter partners. I can be touched. You have not a person that has so many layers between them and I'm getting ready to pull myself back. But you don't have so many layers. You have not high priest, you cannot be there. You don't have so many layers between me and the work. I'm here. So you don't reach out to us, right? Email us, know that we're here, know that we're around. Feel free to do that. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Good evening. My name is Kwame Dunstan. I am a 26-year public school educator. I would teach in the West End currently. I'm here with my daughter. She is going to be representing the Washington cluster at the State Science Fair tomorrow. So saying all that to say, hopefully I'll have a job after this. I had two questions because I did want to acknowledge the panelists and also you, Dr. Johnson. One, I appreciate you being here because we went through a few years of inconsistency in leadership, and I truly appreciate what you have been doing. I've watched what you have been doing. I've tracked it. I appreciate you being here and giving us something solid. I think it's a great foundation that you have laid, and I'm eager for the future. So I do appreciate that.
Going to the real question.
I'm going to ask you a question last. Sitting here and listening to the panelists, and I truly appreciate the state representatives that are here and the people that are working with reform. My question to you is, how are you reaching out to? I understand how to reach you. I can reach all of the people who were presented today. But my colleagues and other educators, how are you all reaching out to public school and charter school educators so that our voices are heard? Since the pandemic, we have been ignored. Our voices have not been heard. And I've heard everybody present and explain certain things in regards to how children can succeed. And I've heard nothing about the public school educator. And that is an issue and a problem that we've been screaming at the top of our lungs and nobody has been hearing. And there are also no resources where we can reach out at an effective level where all of us are being heard. And I'm telling you that we're being ignored. So my question was, how are you all reaching out to educators who are still in the classroom, because we are being hammered right now? Teaching after the pandemic has changed a lot. And now I'm transitioning into you, Dr. Johnson. In what ways are district level officials engaging with teachers in regards, and specifically with instructional literacy? The science of reading is a beautiful thing, but it cannot be done on a computer. It has to be done in print. And up until now, we have been instructed to teach on a computer screen reading. I'm an English language arts educator, and the students have been struggling trying to read off of a computer screen. And the majority of us in society have never read a book cover to cover on a computer screen without audio. So my question is, in what ways can educators be heard so that we can start to transform the way that we are told to be instructed and the way that we implement instruction for our children?
Yeah. Great question. So the part A was for the other group, right? Okay. The part B, so we're just going through a textbook adoption. And so at elementary and at the elementary grade band, there were two selections, benchmark and HMH, right? And 23 schools, I think, chose benchmark and 18 chose HMH. And then at the secondary level, overwhelmingly, it was HMH in the initial review. And so you work for HMH? Oh, no, I'm just messing up. I know you. Oh, you don't work for HMH. But we're really excited to be able to put materials in hand. I'm gonna tell you one thing that's been happening to teachers in Atlanta public schools, in addition, and students, in addition to, so I was a teacher and assistant principal, so look, in addition to our students having technology. So thank y'all for that legislation, K-8 on cell phone, by the way, it is coming. I wish y'all it went all the way up to 12th grade. We coming. I hope this year for Atlanta Public Schools. More to say on that later. But in addition to our students having that technology piece in front of them, our teachers have been, in our schools, and our leaders have been kind of in this like volley back and forth on curriculum materials. And so there's a microwave approach to curriculum or microwave expectation to curricular resources that just does not work. There's no such thing as perfect curriculum. There's no such thing as perfect curriculum, period. No matter how high quality it is, there's always going to be an element of something that's off. And it takes a lot of lift to train teachers and support teachers and to train district support all the things. And if you're changing it every 2 years, you're never, ever going to get and see the results that you really want to see, right? And so we've got to commit to these resources. Now, at the elementary grade band, we know we're giving you 1 year to say we want HMH, we want 7 HMH, or we want benchmark. That was based on teacher voice. It was very split down the middle. And so we did the kind of unorthodox thing. So we got 2. We're going to roll out 2. If you want to stay with the other, that's fine. But we'll give you 1 year to decide. It costs us a little bit more, but it's worth the investment. Because from a change management standpoint, if you are bought into it, it's going to be more effectively implemented. So to answer your question, we got to get materials in your hands, in the students' hands, and that's our commitment. We're in an ever-changing world, so we won't stop, making sure kids got Chromebooks and all those things. But when it comes to reading, I still print stuff. I mean, how do y'all learn when you read? I print it, I write on it, I mark, lawyer along like you. That's what you do. You annotate, you make a note, you circle. It's just what you do. And our students need to understand how to do that. That's a thinking. That's how you process. And so we're committed to making sure you got resources in your hands. Yeah.
How you doing?
What was his second question?
Yeah, I was going
Well, he was asking that. The first question was theirs.
I'm gonna keep the main thing.
Y'all want to answer that? I'm happy to. You got a teacher right here.
An
APS teacher.
APS teacher. Can you do me a favor, and where's my man? Can you repeat the question for me, please?
In what ways of organizations, we have organizations with regards to education reform, we also have state representation. In what ways are you reaching out to educators so that our voices are heard?
Well, everything I do as a teacher is teacher-centered. What's best for my coworkers, what's best for my students. So everything I do, every bill I vote for, every bill I vote against, is what's best for my coworkers, what's best for my students. I got in the campaign after experiencing my students that happened last 2 years ago. I won't share his personal story, but I look at everything through the lens of how will this affect my students' families, their communities, and them themselves. How will this help them grow and succeed? How will this ensure that we can grow and succeed? And if I don't think it's gonna be good for us, I'm voting no. And I'm very clear about that. Everyone of my colleagues knows that. I'm gonna be hardline, I'm gonna be a stickler about education, about my teachers, about my coworkers. I actually voted against the cell phone bill because of that very reason. Because the cell phone bill, what it doesn't do, it doesn't offer an exception for teachers to be able to use cell phones in lessons. And I asked that question. So I said, could we use the cell phone? Let's say, for example, my class might have 15 computers that work. If I need my kids to use the cell phone for the lesson, can they do that? The bill sponsor said no. And then what about emergencies? What if there's an active shooter? Can they pull out the phone? They won't. Bill sponsor said they won't really need it. So I voted no on that bill. But everything I do is in the eyes of what's best for my coworkers, what's best for my students, and how can that help my school, their community, and everyone around them grow in the state.
I just want to make sure we're clear. I voted for that bill. I just want to make sure we know. I actually tried to make that through 12th grade. We were told there's not enough Republican support right now, but the goal is to bring that back next year, to expand that to 12th grade, because I know the distraction that cell phones are. And I just really want to share something real quick. I invited principals from all through my district, from Sandy Springs all the way down to Palmetto. Invited every single principal down to the Capitol for a conversation. Only 5 principals showed up. So we are trying to engage educators. The problem is they're not showing up. So my next thing, I'll try to get teachers. That's what I will do. Yeah.
Yeah. And one thing I do want to say, we're going to be better positioned so you can vote yes on the 9 to 12 expansion. Because we're going to make sure you got access to devices that don't make you feel like I gotta let the kid have himself, you know what I mean? Like, and that, because I hear you.
Hi, okay, I'm sorry, I was giving my conversation, but it was kind of similar to what he was saying and then what Alicia was saying before, as far as with the teacher. I am a special education teacher. I used to work for Atlanta Public Schools for 5 years at Carpalone Middle School. I actually was part of the teachers that actually took the school off the failing schools list. I think it's still on there. It's on there back now, but I know when I was there, it was off.
What you leave for? What you?
Yeah, that's what I'm going to go into right now. So it's I'm learning throughout my years as a teacher. It's so many barriers that we go through as teachers. Community issues. You know, parents might not have the support, but then you're expecting teachers to do everything. Like I'm in middle school and I'm teaching sixth graders that's on the third or second grade reading level, and now you're expecting me to get them up three and four grade levels. That's unfair to even expect teachers to do that. Why don't we go to elementary schools to find out what's going on in elementary schools? Maybe the fact that they're teaching all those subjects, maybe that could be the reason why, you know, they may not be on the level when they get to middle school. So I think we need to be more intentional about, you know, what we're doing. And also we have to also keep in mind that I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, I had a lot on my mind, but it's just the politics, I think. And then you also think about who we're teaching. We don't have enough of our Black teachers. You know, I talk to a lot of our Black educators and ask them, you know, or try to get people to become teachers. And some people say, oh no, I just can't be in the classroom. It's just too much going on. So I think it kind of has a bad connotation to education just because of all the politics that goes along with it, with all the expectations you're expecting that's unbeatable. So what can we do to, you know, help caveat that, I guess, if that makes sense?
No, you raise a big challenge that's not isolated to APS. I mean, I dealt with it.
It's not, I agree.
With it before. So it's you know, I will say that the 11% pay increase does good for a year or two. And then, right, people stay because of culture, you know what I mean? And so we have responsibility to help drive that quality culture. You mentioned going back to second grade. I really think it goes back earlier than that. You know, I hope as we look at our facility footprint and what we have, that we think about the opportunity to expand early learning and access to high quality early learning, because, you know, ideally if you can get them before entry, it makes the probability of them being successful into middle school, into elementary and through middle school much more. But you know, what you're talking about is there's some culture, there's some academic components there. I think it's a multifaceted, answer that's not just a silver bullet, program or thing that you can do. When you talk about the qualities of a really high quality school, leadership matters. Mm-hmm. The leadership matters. At school, at district, all the way up to the board, like leadership matters. And because leadership sets the tone, right? Culturally for what's going to happen, and then making sure that we're clear. And what I mean by clarity is we've got a clear direction, similar to what I just mentioned into about, the way APS has some level of history around just boxing up materials after 2 years. It doesn't work. Oh, we didn't see gains. Let's box it up and send it back to the warehouse.
Like Amplify. You still have Amplify?
I don't need, we got it. We ought to open up a pawn shop for books or something. We got so many.
Because Amplify, that's what was my biggest issue, Amplify program.
We could sell to other districts, but we got to get committed to some things, get some conviction around some things, right? And let those things penetrate for a little while. Let me just tell y'all so about APS might not keep me a long time. I hope they do. I hope they keep me long to see my son graduate. And I gotta roll. But it's 6 years. Can I get it? Hang in there. It's gonna be hard. Look, the Valerie said, "Ain't no way. Ain't no way." I might not. Look here. But let me say this: public education is the only place where we think it's appropriate to volley the chief executive officer, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. What happens every time you hire a new CEO?
Change your policies.
The next person gonna think what I did wasn't no good. You know what I mean? And then you start all over again, right? And then 2 years from now, the new guy or lady sitting in the room and they got on their navy blue suit and they having a conversation with you, telling you some stuff. At some point, you gotta say, okay, we're gonna roll with this for a little minute. You know what I'm saying? Politics are gonna happen, and that's not about me. That's about what's best for schools. Because here's what happens: you're a microcosm of what happens at the school level. Somebody else comes in and it's a new thing. It's a different thing. Now, let me say this: What you got right now is somebody that doesn't do a lot of, like, I'm not a, throw this thing out there and go, we're nuts and bolts. So that the next person that comes in behind us says, okay, that's foundational work. And we can actually build on some of that. And that's our hope and aspiration. But you got a multifaceted situation. I'm taking last.
I know it was a lot, I know.
Yes, but come back. All right. I don't feel overly convinced. We'll keep working on it. All right, last two here.
Hi, my name is Erin Montgomery, and I run an organization called Georgia Educators for Equity and Justice. We are at the Capitol. We are serving Black educators in every way possible. So I do have a couple questions as an EdD candidate myself in leadership. My question to you is, what you said earlier was due to the 11% increase in teacher salary, you're expecting accountability. My question is, what are those KPIs around that? And then also, with that being said, are you looking at the workplace and how are you making sure that teachers are being supported even by their assistant principals and their principals? And how closely are you in conversation with your teachers to make sure of this? And then also, as a new leader coming into, as a leader coming into Atlanta, how are you making sure that you understand the culture of Atlanta to really do your job with efficacy?
We should talk later on. So I mean, I don't mean any harm. Like I'm not new to this. I'm real true to this. And so at 4 o'clock today, we were meeting with principals. I touch everything in the organization. I'm a former chief academic officer. I'm a former teacher, assistant principal. I get it.
I'm aware, yeah.
I get it. I get it. And that's all I'll say. If you want to talk more in depth about specific KPI wise, like we are going to look at the KPIs. That part of the issue is there's too many foci. Like, I don't know if that's a word, but there's just too much stuff that we got people paying attention to. Okay, if milestones is what the end result.
I'm worried about Black educators' mental health. We are not going to achieve academically with our children if we don't make sure that our teachers feel supported emotionally, mentally.
Yeah, and let me speak to that point. So I will give you a little bit of context. I told you I'm not new to this, right? Let me give you another contextual example. In Atlanta Public Schools, about 8,000 employees, right? It's not just emotionally. A lot of times people don't have emotional well-being because like there's a lot that goes into that. It could be financial challenges. It could be, I can't do anything about your relationship. That's on you all. What we are gonna do though, I'm gonna give you like a real example. We only have about 750 employees in our district. Only about 750 that participate in the 403B. Less than 10% of our employees participate in one of the best tax sheltering plans to prepare you for retirement, which is an indicator of some things, right? Like we haven't maybe educated you as well. We haven't, like there's some things that we need to be doing to service the entire educator, right?
And there's a bill that just came out, and I remember a legislator pretty much saying that if you move to different school districts, your retirement might look different, and you don't understand that.
Correct.
And so how do we make sure that we do that?
And we've got an obligation, I believe, to make sure that those types of things are happening, to make sure that the whole teacher is as whole as they can possibly. You know, you can't have a whole, when we want our children, when we talk about whole child, we got to have whole adults.
Absolutely.
As whole as we can possibly make. Because now you're an adult. Now, you know, you got some adulting you need to do too. Now, I'm not going.
You got to be able to afford your insurance to go to therapy. It's expensive out here. Even for with a raise, we got to think about how much it costs to live in APS versus how much you're making.
You're correct. And affordable housing is another conversation. Like these are broad things that we won't solve in isolation by ourselves.
I understand.
But hear me this on 11%. Like we understand the importance of culture in the building, and leadership matters. And that leadership doesn't live in isolation at the principal. It's the assistant principal. It's the instructional coach. I've been very honest with folks. I say it all the time. I came from a very lean school district. About the same amount of students, about less than a third of the budget. Outcomes were better. And the truth of the matter is, I had one instructional coach. So I asked questions like, what are they doing? What does coaching actually look like? Well, the truth is we don't have a coherent coaching model that's happening across the district, right? So when we talk about instructional coaching and supportive teachers, coaching looks one way in one building and it looks completely different in another building. And some of it depends on what side of town you're on.
Yeah.
So I go into planning. I ain't gonna validate myself, but I'm on it. Okay, next
Thank
question.
you.
Thank you so
I've been in the
much.
planning session in your building, Valerie.
This is going to be our
Planning
final question. And for our people online, thank you so much, because they're on their line online saying, when y'all gonna end? We will end after this question, and thank you all so much. We apologize. We did start a little bit late, but we are going to wrap it up with the last question. Thank you so much.
Hey everybody, my name is Deandria Bird. Zaire, Zari, and Zuri mom. That's my most important job, but I'm also an education advocate. To the teachers, I'm glad y'all mad. I was in a hearing today at the Capitol where they were gonna hear a bill to give y'all more sick days, but the Republicans hijacked it and made it an anti-DEI bill. So use that madness to show up, because the Republicans like to be performative and say, where are all the teachers? Where are all the students? So where y'all at? I need y'all to get mad for real and say something about it. But my question for you, Dr. Johnson, thank you for being here. With Atlanta being the mecca of entertainment, what can you do to start preparing or creating pathways for our students to be able to take advantage of these jobs? We got Tyler Perry Studios, we got the World Cup coming. Our kids they never even been, some of them, to the AU Center down the street. So what pathways can you create for HBCU partnerships and entertainment jobs in the school?
So I've talked to them. We want a traditional. We got to have a performing arts school, right? Number one. The other thing is our pathways. So we are putting money in the budget. South Atlanta, heavy machinery. Like there are some pathways from a vocational standpoint that have a ton of opportunity, and we're working through that right now in a targeted way. Farrell and South Atlanta are two, Booker T. Washington 3 of the ones we're focused on right now. And that literally was today, and so they don't even know that. And so we'll continue to lean into those spaces. I mean, that's the work. When I mentioned that graduate, we got to make sure we're like fully locked into all of the areas. We have a history of working with business partners and community, and so we'll be looking for business partners that really want to collaborate on big things for our students to give them access and exposure. So.
And then my very last question, I'm concerned about the way our governor refused federal funds to feed kids. How can you partner with the good partners like Gooder to make sure in APS we're isolated from that not feeding kids situation that our governor wants to do? Because I know Gooder does a lot. Like APS has some really good partnerships. I just want to know, like, how can we do more of the good things when it comes down to feeding the kids in the summer and stuff like that?
Yeah. So I know we have a Gooder at the hub. Like we'll continue to look for partnerships to feed children. Like that'll be a number one. And frankly, the board made that investment as we look to bring school nutrition in house. Like it is rare, if ever, that a school district brings school nutrition into their general fund. And so the district brought it into the general fund, which is an indicator in and of itself, right, of how we value, yes, to partnership, but to making sure our kids get quality in the school nutrition space. So thank you.
Can we give him a round of applause? I want everybody to stand up because I think he deserves a standing round of applause. And let me tell you why, because I've been talking to this superintendent since he got here, and I've never heard no out of his mouth. He has said, yes, let's get on my schedule. I'm going to have crowd, I'll come and speak. And he has kept his word. Dr. Johnson, I want to thank you for continuing partnering with Book and our collaborative group of folks who are looking to make sure kids get the best K-12 education possible. Another round of applause, guys. I want to thank you as the CEO of Book for coming out. I know we started a little late, but this is what we're all about. And so there's more food. If you want to grab something on the go, it's already paid for. But we're going to continue these types of conversations, and we're going to pick some other issues that we think came out today that actually deserve its own airtime and may do some future events. So stay connected to what we're doing. We love you. Have a safe travel home and continue to connect with the work we're doing with Book and our coalition of partners. Thank you.